The surrender. The movie begins with a small suburban house where an aging old man named Robert lies on his bed while his wife, Barbara, and daughter Megan take care of his needs. It becomes evident that Robert has been suffering for a long time, a situation that has only been exacerbated by Barbara's desire to control every aspect of his treatment. While Megan wanted to deal with her father's condition pragmatically, Barbara was inclined to rely on dubious healing methods in the hopes of keeping him alive. On the very day she returned home, Megan mentioned to Barbara the nonprofit organization she was working with to set up a scholarship program for underprivileged, marginalized children. She added that her father had mentioned that he would contribute to the scholarship if the grant she was aiming for didn't come through. Barbara made it very clear that she would not give Megan the money. Barbara urged her to apply for more grants instead of relying on her parents to fulfill her wish. Worried that her mother is losing herself in the process of caring for Robert, Megan suggests taking a break. She requested her mother to go out for dinner and spend some time alone while she took care of her father. The nurse had told Megan in secrecy that Barbara intentionally didn't give Robert the full dose of morphine because she wanted him to call out for her when he was in pain. She felt needed and wanted, and it gave her a purpose. Even though Barbara left the house in her car, she simply waited in the neighborhood. She was not in the mental state to treat herself to a nice dinner or discuss her situation with her friends. It was also evident that Barbara's yoga instructor, Deb, had a massive influence on her, and she had grown fixated on alternative practices in witchcraft, believing in things like crystal healing, leaving loose teeth under the bed, and even braiding a witch's ladder with her own hair. She could not rely on medical treatment alone, and keeping Robert alive had become the sole goal in her life. Meanwhile, when Megan was alone with her father and he woke up asking for Barbara, she didn't know what to do. She checked his schedule, and it was not the time for his morphine dosage. She wanted to call her mother, but she didn't wish to disturb her. So Megan ended up feeding her father the morphine. It pained Megan to see him suffer. Megan was in the bathroom when Barbara arrived. When she stepped out, she informed her mother about the morphine dose. Barbara was surprised because as soon as she returned home, she had already given him a dose. Megan suggested taking him to the hospital, but Barbara didn't think that was an option. Robert was on the DNR list, which meant that he wanted to pass away in peace rather than allow medical intervention. Barbara and Megan decided to sleep beside Robert that night to keep a constant check on him. When Megan woke up, she saw her father's eyes and mouth wide open. He had passed away in his sleep, and his body had already turned cold. Although Megan is sad, surprisingly, Barbara looked very calm. As it turned out, her yoga instructor had referred Barbara to a shaman who could bring back the dead, and she had been preparing all along to perform the ritual immediately after Robert's demise. Megan was shocked when Barbara told her about the shaman and the ritual. She didn't approve of her mother messing with the fabric of life and death, and moreover, she was convinced that the shaman was a scammer. She argued with her mother and stepped out of the house to clear her mind. Megan imagined her father seated by her side, and she asked him for advice. She knew that her father would have wanted her to give Barbara a chance. She too was grieving, and allowing her to do something that would let her believe that she tried her best could be the only way to help her heal. And if the experiment failed, she could always blame the shaman. Barbara didn't expect Megan to support her, but she was glad to have her daughter by her side. The mother and daughter prepared the ritual room according to the instructions Barbara had received. She had to get rid of everything that belonged to Robert. They needed a clean slate for the ritual to work, and they gathered all his belongings and photographs and burned them in the fire. Megan was hesitant about letting go of a picture she had with her father in her dance costume. She cherished the memory, but Barbara encouraged her to let go of it. The shaman was a strange, bearded man adorned in a hat and a coat. He didn't speak out loud and only whispered his wishes to Barbara. The minute she handed him a bag full of cash, Megan lost her cool. She couldn't believe that her mother was about to give away her father's entire savings. She reminded her that she too was dependent on it, and if the ritual didn't work, they would be penniless. But Barbara refused to listen to her. She repeatedly stated that nothing mattered now except for resurrecting Robert, and she was ready to pay any price for it. Megan wondered if she was doing the right thing supporting her mother's whims, but she also knew that she couldn't leave her mother alone with the creepy man, so she ended up joining her mother for the ritual. By the time she returned to the room, the money was gone. The shaman had probably burned it up as well, because the wealth belonged to Robert, and it couldn't stay either. Barbara encouraged Megan to sit in the ritual circle with her father's corpse at the center of it. The circle was sealed by the shaman using the ashes of Robert's burnt belongings. It was meant to protect them, and they could not leave the circle until the ritual was complete. The first surrender, his belongings, helped them seal the circle. The second surrender was meant to take them to the other side, where they would summon Robert's spirit back to his body, and the third surrender would help them return home together. Megan didn't realize what her mother meant by surrendering until she saw the shaman chop one of her mother's fingers off. He had drugged Megan, and even though she didn't want to go through with it, she didn't have a choice. Soon the shaman started chanting, and Megan and Barbara repeated after him. The charms in the room started to move, and a strong beam of white light shone down on them. All of a sudden, the room went completely dark, and by the time Megan and Barbara lit the candles in the circle, they discovered the shaman's face was half consumed. As soon as they were transported to the other side, Robert's body was possessed by evil. The protective circle had become penetrable, and Robert dragged the shaman's body outside and devoured it. Megan immediately knew that the creature was not her father. Even though it was his body, his behavior was demonic. Barbara was disappointed when she discovered that Megan had held on to the photograph of her and Robert, which was why the ritual didn't work. She instructed Megan to burn it and use it to seal the circle. Megan didn't have a choice now, and she followed her mother's orders. Barbara refused to accept that the ritual had failed and the man who stood in front of her was not her husband. In a desperate attempt, she slit her wrist and tried to lure Robert. She wanted him to step into the circle so that they could return home, but Robert refused to cross. Barbara desperately reached out to convince Robert to come along with her, but instead the creature dragged her out of the circle and devoured her in seconds. Megan was left all alone to figure out a way to return home. She was in hell, and she didn't know what to do. She could hear the devil screaming, and she saw a group of dead humans walking around her. Their eyes were white, and they walked almost like zombies. Megan remembered that the third surrender could take her home, so she chopped another finger off and screamed in pain. But nothing happened. She was still stuck in the void, and the unbearable pain paired with the drugs she took resulted in vivid hallucinations. She felt relieved, imagining that her house was right under the wooden surface of the circle. Megan removed the wooden boards and entered her house, but she soon figured out that she'd been transported back in time. In the end, Barbara approached her daughter from outside the protective circle. She had turned into a primitive, devilish creature just like Robert, and she stared at Megan with her glowy eyes. Megan knew that the creature was not her mother. Her soul was gone the minute she was dragged out of the circle. But she wanted her mother to know that even though she was stubborn and selfish, she loved her and all her imperfections. She regretted not saying it more often to her parents. When Megan seemingly blows a hole open in the protection circle, an act that immediately triggers a flash of blinding light over proceedings, It is highly reminiscent of the light that shines over the circle when they are transported to the netherworld in the first place. While the exact mechanics are vague, it could be a sign that her third surrender is complete, allowing her to return home.